We really wanted to hear from some of the young women, and we're lucky because we got 2 of them coming up. From Taos High School. Oh my, I'm just looking. Isahbo, Holly. Right? Say your name with you, because I'm,
I'm Isahbo Holly. This poem I wrote about my grandmother.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's a powerful poem.
Some of you may know her, Anne Holly.
Yeah.
My grandmother was a paintbrush. In the mornings, she would rise from her can on the shelf to streak India ink with her bare body on paper. So lightly would she brush her fingertips down the canvas. Any mistake was a miracle. She spent her evenings soaking in water, trying to cleanse the frustrations of fumbled watercolors. My hands kissed the contours of piano keys and dandelions. There was never any time for art. Her elusive paintbrush was always bristle deep in velvet women or Butoh nudes. I was her art as much as her twisted, ink-stained fingers were, building us from the raw material of 6 canvases, the hand-molded, don't hold them children of an artistic dichotomy, raised by abstract pairs and old-fashioned cursive. My grandmother was a ballet bar, weathered from the pressure of so much grace, her skin gleaming from years of use, bearing down on her like one-legged dancers. Her 6 children polished the poplar curves of her body, bending for their nutcracker fantasies, her elasticity always echoing back into position. My grandmother was a dictator. Our gnarled, paint-stained road sign in bold black letters broadcasting her way for us to follow. Still, I feel her weathered knuckles weaving themselves into my back, prodding my vertebrae into a straight line. I will never become a dancer if my back isn't straight. My grandmother could never evoke any emotion from me. Peering over the side of her deep white coffin, the lotus pods laced through stiff fingers, and the way skin softens with the nibblings of decomposition is a tasteless memory. Building her coffin was no different than building our relationship. It was only centered around art after all. Not too much emotion got in the way. It was all brush strokes, brushed off comments, brush away those tears when no one is looking, because I don't cry at funerals. 6 shifty faces grasping the rope handles of a white box. Black ink stains poured down our cheeks where tears should have been. The neuroses and the long years just stretched us all a little too thin. The snowfall was titanium, and it coated the party like spilled paint. We were all painters that day. We were all painted that day. I have forgotten what it is like to be foolish. Forgotten the time when the pebbles I threw landed lightly, not causing craters, not like boulders. I have forgotten how to make dandelion crowns and bathe in mud. How we used to crack the second skin off in frigid hose water. It was like discovering we could have snow in the summer. I need to remind you of how we used to sit in the dark and rejoice in hot steam falling down our shoulders. The heat couldn't help but cause us a spiritual experience. We were holy. To remind you of how we loved the way it burned as we listened to our Father sing about the sky. I need to remind you that I am made out of adrenaline and ivory. I remember how the excitement used to flow through my thoughts like electric warmth from afternoon sun. You tell me now that all of my smiles are stolen tusks. I stealthily sneak one onto my lips, poached from someone else's laughter. You say I don't laugh much anymore. Remember how we used to go sledding? How when I caught air on a bump, girlish cackles would bubble out through my shaking body. I swear there were ripples in the snow around us. But my ivory boulder just sat in the cradle of winter, hoping to soak up the memories. We knew in our candy-happy 8-year-old way that these years were ending, that soon Snickers would be a little too sweet and cooties would be coveted. But I want to remind you of how we fought to keep them off, perpetually chasing each other around playgrounds, just hoping we wouldn't get kissed. Remember how we used to have picnics in February? Our limited knowledge of cooking only allowing us to make sandwiches and lemonade, spread out on a blanket over a frozen acequia, rose petals sprinkled around us to attract fairies, contrasted with the snow like the foreboding fires of our adolescence. We sat and giggled in our icy fantasy, craving adulthood more than cake. I remember how I used to fish all day, with the patience of someone much beyond my years, just hoping to catch something. The lack of success and boredom culminating into a fantastic tantrum later on. I screamed injured 8-year-old insults into the carpet. You say I wait too long with my lure cast out. Sometimes I have to move a little to get things done. But the silence and the lull of my aqueous lifestyle just keep me waiting.
So I have 2 poems, and this one I actually wrote this morning. Let's see how this goes. I once heard that strong women are like power lines. They stretch their sinewy embrace across whole communities, keep our gears and cogs turning, and often go unnoticed. But it kills us when they fall. Okay, I didn't hear that, I made it up. But the point is, this morning I looked at my mother, head bowed over dishes, scrubbing breakfast plates like it's the only thing keeping the world spinning, putting off saying goodbye to my dad. He is off again, because there is no more money to be made in house. My father builds homes for other people. I look at my mother and I see a power line. This woman waterlogged with grief but still standing, weathering her family with so much grace, caught in the middle of a thunderstorm, and she just keeps sputtering off energy like rain bouncing from her skin. My mother is a mountain. She shot up with the pressure of 2 tectonic plates smashing into each other. But I think she's beautiful like this. I think we're beautiful like this. All edges and shadows and rocky cliff faces, no one will climb when we are crumbling. So let's fall away. Fall like it's okay to change, because this morning on my way into town, I saw so many power lines. Lined up like arsenals against bad fortune. But I think I want to be a willow today, because deep down, the wind moves all of us. I once wrote that a strong woman's body is the relic of a saint. Restitched and patched like quilts, we are recycled beauty, and thank God, because none of this should go to waste. My father is a pocket watch. He is bronze and beautifully inlaid, with a depiction of wisdom worked into his perfectly furrowed brow, a shiny new back of copper reflecting the sun. He glares. Sometimes I lose my vision directly in his line of sight, because all I can see is the disappointment frowning me down like freshly polished burgundy. He is an open back beauty. I can see all of the gears working away right behind his skin, the flex of his forearm when he opens the pickle jar for my mother, the bulge of his arteries and tightly clenched jaw when my brother said, "Fuck you," and walked out. The slight strain of the muscle in his temple when he smiles. He is an antique work of art, a man made of bronze in a household of Play-Doh. I am too blue for my father, too blue for my father. So I tiptoe past his silence every morning as he reads the newspaper, hoping I don't start his temper a-ticking, but hoping secretly that he'll notice the report card I've placed directly in his line of sight, and I'll see that slight strain of the muscle in his temple, but he never does. So I keep hoping secretly. But I adorn him like a fashion statement, hoping the bronze will wear off on my Play-Doh skin, but it never does. He's too heavy for me. The chain just chafes my neck. By the end of the day, he feels more like shackles than a father, so I come home to my jail cell. Angry fear, a light in my eyes, I am ready to recoil before he has said anything. Our relationship is a perpetual game of tug-of-war I can't win, because a pocket watch doesn't sympathize with wasted time. My father is a pocket watch, counting every mistake I make on the second hand, our hand spinning out of control, trying to wave the misunderstanding through like a tired traffic director. Time is not forgiving. He is never forgiven. Yesterday, I laid in bed for an hour just staring at my pocket watch, thinking how frustrating it is to be made of Play-Doh in a household of bronze. I am too blue for my father.
So now we're going to hear Zia Paulus.
Years before you flipped your fringe like another flippant, fictitious boy band boyfriend, you knew how to be pensive and poised perfectly in the company of an ever-sputtering stream and be mellow in the mud next to me. We were held for an Indian summer in blanched love graffiti limbs that suspended us in simple sapling embraces, bracing each other for the aftershock of laughing autumn as she burrowed between our filmy fern fingertips, hoping that one day the branches from our cowlicks would catch one to another and be cobwebs in the troposphere. We could be as thoughtless and thornless as marionette strings of moss that grew like icicles in midday trees, and sometimes I still see you and smell that red mud drying into tiny clay pots in the laugh lines of our jeans. I'm almost sorry that I dodged your campfire kiss for my confusion-cluttered cheek, but I thought of you too much like a brother, and I was bashful of you, balling me up into body humor. I'm ashamed to say I was jealous that you wore the perfect pretense of a completely concrete stranger while I sulked into juniper berry jackets and just glared. You learned that denial from your mother, in constant labor from an imaginary abusive lover, but could never birth another child. Your anxiety of authority was lacerated into your laughter every time we passed by bloody sapphire police lights, an heirloom spotlight becoming in handcuffs. Your mother couldn't hold her back to that light. She backed into that light with her hands above her head. And when your cousin's skull was splintered by the slap of gunpowder burns, you wilted into something I wished I didn't recognize, speaking in sedated pop culture prose that I thought you'd never swallow. You found excuses in the text idioms exchanged with people you didn't want to know. I am sorry Your family had to fight for the wholeness of their slaughtered son. Your family had to hold Holocaust children by their heart to stop them from crawling into his blanket cradles. Your mother cradled you, and her water finally broke into a brackish brook that filled the hospital hallways and made nurses slip, crying for someone they didn't even love. And so, you became. The blood drying and suturing scars, the pen fidget clicking on medical clipboards, the sound of the well-oiled morgue doors, the pulsing of your family's quiet morning. You forgot about that morning, one Indian summer when we could be happy because we were simple.
One of the great joys for Veronica and for me is to welcome our young people, our young poets. And next up from Taos High is Serena Smith. And this is thanks to Francis Hahn. Francis, would you stand for just a minute?
Thank you. I'm going to read an old poem about my mother. Thank you. They told me apple trees grow apples, but I refused to believe because when I looked in the mirror, I saw a strawberry. So in this case, I told myself the apple fell far from the tree. But apple trees don't grow strawberries. And when I was young, I looked to my mother for strength. She was the flower that never wilts, but as the years grew longer, she grew lonely by herself. And the mother that I had imagined was only that. A fake, a porcelain doll I finally realized could break a picture in my brain, and at that moment I realized it. I told myself to be a pomegranate, because apples get bruised and worms crawl and hide to eat away our insides. In the years my mom spent in an abusive relationship, she told me never to fall for a man like that. He'll eat you up and there won't be nothing left. But every time he apologized, she grabbed his hand and cried. She pretended she didn't know her core was collapsing, or that her seeds were rotting. I began to hate her for renouncing her strength. Like others renounced their faith, she became dependent like a tree lusting for rain, but that rain never came, so I became her protector, her mother in all things. So when he finally left her, she'd have my back on which to lean. I became as sturdy as a tree for my family, but the year I turned 14, my roots were transposed. And I fell for a boy resembling my mother's worst fears. Our love was on ice and I cried silent tears. I fell for a boy reminiscent of the pain she suffered every time he sank deeper into depression, cracking bottles to numb the tension. I fell for a boy kindred with the man I swore I despised, as I told myself I would never be my mother. But I suppose it was fated. And I tried to recover. And I have been told that apple trees grow apples. And as much as I wanted to believe I was an orange, the scent of apples grew on me till everyone could smell it. And when I recovered and denounced the boy that bruised me, I saw my mother as the flower that had sustained herself and kept her children safe. The image I held began to chafe, and I saw my mother for what she was, my strong, sturdy tree, because apple trees grow apples, and I am no longer ashamed to be my mother's daughter.
Mm.